Welcome back to Cult Pop. I'm your host, Jim Hall, and today we have a fantastic show for you. We've got a great novel to start off the show from a new author, Stephen Deas, and the author is The Adamantine Palace, and it is just an amazing high fantasy novel. I ran through this thing in 2 days. I was just so thrilled with it. Quickly paced, original concepts, great ideas, and you're just going to pick it. I just recommend that you pick this thing up right after the show because quick chapters, you go right through it, and I know it's going to be one of my new favorite fantasy series, and I think it'll be one of yours at home also. So, Stephen, thank you so much for being on the show today.
All right, guys, thank you for having me.
Really, absolutely love the book. It was a real pleasure when I came across it, decided I wanted to contact you to see if you'd be on the show. A really, really nice and unique fantasy book you've done here. High fantasy at just its very best. I think you've done a really great job, and I want you to talk a little bit about some of the differences in your novel. The Adamantine Palace is quite different. It's a great fantasy story. It's got all the sword fight, the intrigue, all the political stuff, but you've got a real unique take on dragons. Dragons play a huge role, and they're not cuddly, lovable little dragons. In your created world, dragons play a very, very important role. And why don't you talk a little bit about that and a little bit about the inspiration for your work?
Yeah, okay. Well, the dragons in the Adamantine Palace, really the inspiration for the way they're set up came as a sort of reaction to the sort of popular presence of dragons in fantasy novels as a sort of glorified riding horses, and it seemed to me and to my editor that dragons needed something of a renaissance, and I was looking to go back to the dragons of sort of epic myths, of Viking myths, Beowulf, the dragon of Sigurd, Smaug, that kind of dragon, when dragons were almost your archetypal monster. Of course, the trouble with having dragons like that is that, well, they tend to run around and burn stuff, and they're like 50-ton flying monsters, and some guy with a broadsword just ain't going to be able to do much about that. So the premise of the Adamantine Palace is that dragons existed in this way a long time ago and were basically the dominant species in the world, and that at some point in the not too distant past, the memorable past, humankind, with the help of a rather mysterious, almost godlike figure about which I won't say anything now, but you can be sure he'll figure in later volumes, managed to find a way to basically subdue these dragons and effectively enslave them. And having managed to do this, humans now become the dominant species. Human civilization prospers and flourishes, but they still have these dragons. They can't get rid of them, even if they wanted to. They just don't know how to get rid of them. So they live in this sort of perpetual state of uneasy coexistence where the dragons are kept tame, but they're always just an inch away from remembering what they were. And of course, for there to be a story, that's exactly what happens. One of the dragons, there's an accident, one of the dragons is left basically unattended and starts to remember who and what it is.
Yes, and from there the book really kicks in. It's really just amazing. I really liked how you did that these dragons are very much manipulated, owned and controlled by the higher class, higher society, but it's with obvious chemicals, alchemy, and things like that manipulate these very fearful creatures. And I liked that because I'm sick to death of the cuddly dragon that flies, or the similar type things in the movie Avatar and all that. I really loved that these are beasts to be respected and feared, and now that they're, one has become aware of what's going on and the manipulation, it just really drives quite a wonderful novel. And in going on the internet, I wanted to prepare kind of for our interview. I was reading some reviews and reading some of your comments around, and I read something you had stated, Stephen, and I thought it was really interesting. You described your work as flashbang fantasy, and I kind of laughed after reading the novel because I thought, wow, you know, that perfectly describes this first book. Because I was trying to explain it to a friend, and I said it's got all the elements of all the fantasy stuff you really like, but I said there's something a little more that I really loved, and I didn't know how to describe it. And with you saying flashbang fantasy, I really like that. I like that choice of words for that. Why don't you tell the folks at home a little bit about what you mean that your fantasy is flashbang fantasy?
Well, when I describe the book as flashbang fantasy. What I was alluding to is the sheer pace that I tried to put into the storyline. One of the primary aims in writing The Adamantine Palace, at least in the way it's written, was to kind of drag you in right in chapter 1 and take you on a ride that was like riding on the back of a dragon, flying at full tilt, full speed, through mountains, down through canyons, round and round, never really taking much of a breath, trying to be pretty relentless with the pace of the story, because I felt that was appropriate for the kind of monsters that these dragons are. That there's no half measures with these creatures, and I wanted the story to reflect that, and not just the descriptions of the creatures and how they behave, but the whole feel of the story to reflect that sort of speed and that whole sort of kinetic energy that these creatures have.
Well, I think that's a perfectly, you should coin that term, because I really like, you should make shirts with it and all that. It perfectly describes your work and your book. I can't tell you enough how much I was just really pleased. There's so many fantasies out there now. There's a lot of new science fiction, a lot of new fantasy, and a lot of it's just absolutely fantastic, and a lot of it's really bad. Well, yours is the fantastic stuff. Really, some old concepts, but just really pumped up and invigorated with the new stuff. You've just done a wonderful job, and I can't say enough about how much I enjoyed it. I want to mention a little bit about something I think fans at home would really get a kick out of, is that if they visit your website, you have a bunch of downloadable stuff, but in particular there's maps, you've got a blog, all kinds of stuff like everybody does now, but you've got maps and things going on there. Why don't you talk a little bit about your website and your interaction with the fans there?
Sure, okay. Well, it kind of started, I suppose that the downloadable content started with a map. The whole website started with, I kind of had the idea in my head that just from reading other fan forums, and particularly the sort of, I guess the long delays that have been experienced in the George R.R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire series. And there are a lot of fans going, well, when's it going to come? When's it going to come? And there's news and there's no news. And I kind of picked up from that what fans want from a website, at least in part, is for me, the author, to just say where things are at and try and do that on a regular basis. So there's never any doubt in anyone's mind when books are going to be coming out, what stage they're at. If there's a problem, something's going to be delayed for a year, you get to hear about it rather than just being left in limbo. So that's really where the website started, and I've tried to do that on a fairly regular basis, once a week, update the website, and if I've been up to doing anything else that's interesting, then I'll talk about that. But I always try to make sure that anyone who wants to know where I'm at with writing the books that I'm writing, you can go to the website, you can look at the latest news update, and that'll pretty much tell you right there and then.
Well, and that's one of the wonderful things when you're a sci-fi or fantasy fan, growing up in the 80s and 90s, like I was, 70s, 80s, 90s, you know, you didn't know when a new book was coming out. You didn't know if you liked a particular author. The great thing about today in the website is being able to keep up with an author and knowing what they're doing. And you've got a great website, but I really think that downloadable map is really cool, because I know for fans of any age, it's kind of a neat thing to have an idea what's going on. But for the young fans in particular, I know when I was real young, I really would have gotten a kick out of that. I think it's great now, and it's really neat content. And we'll have your website up throughout the show so people can certainly go to it. And when they go to our website, we'll link up, because it's certainly a worthy website and something to check out. But while we've got a little bit of time left, I wanted to talk, Stephen, that The Adamantine Palace, great book, but it's first of a cycle. The Memory of Flames is the cycle, and here in the U.S., we've got the new novel. The Adamantine Palace is new here, but you're going to have the second book coming out in London soon, so when fans pick up the book here, they can also go on to Amazon if they don't want to wait to get the U.S. copy in 8 months to a year. They can go online and get the British copy, which will be coming out soon. Why don't you just talk quickly about the second novel coming out in the cycle?
Yeah, right. In the Adamantine Palace, there are a number of storylines that some of them conclude and some of them don't, and even the ones that do conclude, you can kind of see that there are parties not happy about the way things have panned out, and they're probably not going to sit around and leave things as they are. So King of the Crags is basically a continuation of that storyline. There's a little less of the politics. There's a little bit more about the dragons. It's pretty much hot off the press. Got a copy of it here. These printings arrived about a week ago. It'll be out in the UK in about 3 weeks. And there's quite a lot more in King of the Crags about how the dragons were tamed and where they come from. Not everything yet. You're gonna have to wait for book 3 really for that, but you'll get to find a little bit more. What I'm trying to do really is, the Adamantine Palace gives you a sort of superficial cut of the world and several of the characters, and the King of the Crags, as well as moving the story on and still pretty much at the same pace as I had before, is trying to look a little bit under the surface. So you get to find out a little bit more about where the dragons come from, what's driving some of the main characters to do what they're doing.
Excellent. Well, I, for one, cannot wait to get my hands on the next book, because it just absolutely, I love the first one so much. Stephen, it's been a real pleasure to have you on. It's Stephen Deas has been my guest for the first half of the show. The Adamantine Palace is his novel. I can't tell you enough how much I enjoyed this book. I really want you folks at home to check out the website, go to your favorite bookstore, pick up the book, because I'm telling you, you'll absolutely love it. Stephen, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Once again, that was Stephen Deas. He's the author of The Adamantine Palace. Pick it up at your favorite bookstore. Go online and get it. It's a great book. And then the sequel, if you're in Britain watching this or overseas, you should be able to get the sequel real soon also. And for you U.S. fans, you can also go to Amazon over there or one of your favorite sellers over there and pick up the book, because like myself, I don't want to wait the 9 months or so. So I have a feeling once you read the first book, you're going to want to snap up that second one. But stay tuned for more Cult Pop. Welcome back to Cult Pop. With me now is Mark Terry, author of The Fallen, a really fantastic book that you're going to want to pick up. And you're going to remember Mark was on Cult Pop about 2 years ago. And you're going to remember one of his lovable characters, Derek Stillwater, one of the greatest action guys out there. He beats 24, he beats Matt Damon's characters, he beats everybody. My favorite tough guy, all-around super agent, Derek Stillwater, is the star of The Fallen. And we had him on in the past for some other books, and I've gotten a lot of emails from you folks saying, have Mark on again. Here he is. Mark, thank you so much for being on the show.
Glad to be here.
The Fallen is out right now, just come out, and it's absolutely a top-notch thriller. I mentioned 24, and it's very apropos, because boy, does this book move, and it moves quick. And it's basically over a few hours, some real action. It's boom, boom, boom with global implications, not just something happening locally or here or there. These events have global implications, and basically Derek Stillwater there once again to save the day. And fans at home will remember him from your past books. And now some things have happened, and he's kind of in the situation now. He's been inserted kind of covertly to help out in a situation during a G8 summit. And I'm going to let you take it from there so that I don't ruin too much.
Right. Interesting that you say lovable. That wasn't the word I would have picked. Makes him sound like a teddy bear.
Action-wise, yeah. Not lovable, huggable. Lovable, like, wow, what an exciting character.
Yeah. We talk about, a little bit in the high concept description of a book, The Graduate meets Moby Dick. If you can imagine such a thing. Searching to date the great white whale. But in this case, we really have used it, said it's Die Hard at the G8 summit. And it really is. I mean, Derek he's a troubleshooter for Homeland Security. They have had some actionable intelligence that they believe this terrorist group called the Fallen Angels, which actually showed up in the first book,
right. The
Devil's Pitchfork. Obviously, there was some unfinished business at the end of that book. And so Derek is put undercover as a maintenance guy for a good long time, like 8 months, at this resort in Colorado Springs. And sure enough, when the Fallen does make a run at the G8 summit, and they do lock down the entire place, get all the world leaders that are at the summit, 20 world leaders, basically strap suicide vests on them and put up on the global TV network coverage and saying, here are our demands, and we'll start killing a world leader every hour until we get them. And Derek's the resort consists essentially of 3 interconnected buildings, and Derek is kind of trapped inside these buildings with all the world leaders, but he's not in the actual ballroom. So he goes around through all the crawl spaces and tunnels and everything, kind of starting his own guerrilla war against these terrorists, trying to take them out one at a time to even the odds until he can get some backup from the rest of the world.
Well, and even prior to that, there was some real hair-raising moments where when the book is first ramping up, he's kind of I don't want to say to it, but he's kind of trapped in a situation because there's all type of security for all types of world leaders that are there, and he is, of course, recognized. Now, they don't know, is he, from previous situations, is he dead? He's rumored to be dead, and blah, blah, blah. Right. And then he may be recognized, and what I liked is that his 8 months of experience doing the janitorial and Mr. Fix-It work helps him get out of a situation when he's trapped at first. I thought that was real good. When he's in the freezer.
You're talking the walk-in freezer.
Yes.
I actually did research on walk-in freezers for that. Derek, all of the books are interconnected. You could easily read you could pick up The Fallen, never having read a Derek Stillwater novel, and I don't think you'll have any problems getting into the story or being introduced to the character. But I have a tendency to leave just a tiny little bit, a thread loose it's somewhere in the book, and it seems like every other book, I decide I'm going to go back and tie up that thread.
Tie something up, sure.
And that's what happened, that there were some events at the end of The Devil's Pitchfork that I wanted to get back to. There were some events at the end of The Serpent's Kiss that led directly into The Fallen. And you don't have to read those books. You're certainly welcome to. But you don't have to read those books to know what's going on or to enjoy the story. And so all those come into play. And as a result, there's a lot of people involved in law enforcement. He's a troubleshooter for Homeland Security, but FBI knows who he is. The Director of National Intelligence knows who he is. But no one's entirely sure if he's a good guy. They think he is, but they don't really know. And him being kind of on the loose causes some problems with, how far do we trust this guy? Right. Whose side is he working on?
Right. At this point, when this book starts, they don't know if he's dead, if he's rogue agent, what's going on. Right.
And it makes it a lot more fun for me and hopefully for the reader. He's very much. He's a troubleshooter, and he's kind of, his boss is the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. So he answers directly to that person, and there's other people involved, including the President and the Director of National Intelligence and the FBI and all these military leaders that are like, but, they go to the Secretary and say, you told us one thing about this guy. They feel like there's a cover-up. And that creates a lot of tension with kind of all the bureaucratic things going on. Is there's all of these people. We go from the resort where we got that going on to the White House Emergency Operations Center, because the president's incapacitated. He's one of the world leaders, so the vice president is in charge, and you've got all of these other cabinet members involved in this who aren't actually at the resort or out of the country, who are saying, well, we have to do something. How do we respond to this? And there's a lot of infighting politics going on at the same time.
And the vice president seemed not quite up to the task of when you first read.
Yeah.
He's very...
Well, he's a lot more interested in stepping up and taking charge rather than solving the problem in front of him. He's
right,
very
without having
political.
it didn't seem like he really had the ability or the wherewithal to do it. But we're talking with Mark Terry, author of The Fallen. Absolutely love the book, Mark, and I wanted to state something, that this is a great jumping on point. If you didn't read the first two books, the Derek Stillwater books, this is a great jumping on point. You don't have to be familiar, but I think after you read this book, it's like a Ludlum or a lot of favorite. You're going to want to go back and get these other books.
Yeah, I think so.
And Jerry, my director, says it best when he says, you're the kind of author you end up disliking, but in a good way. Disliking because you pick it up and then you lose sleep, because there is no good, okay, I will stop at this chapter. Really quick paced chapters, and then, okay, one more, and then 11 o'clock becomes 12, 12 becomes 2, and you're zipping through the book. Yeah,
good.
And so just a really great job. But with the Fallen, you're with a new publisher. They've done it's a beautiful job, really helping promote you. I've got to believe you're going to want to do more Stillwater stuff in the future and more work with these folks in the future.
Yeah, we actually have and I am. Ocean View Publishing has been really terrific. I had the 2 books with a different publisher, then I have 2 books with this publisher. So we have another Derek Stillwater book that is scheduled now for September 2011. So we're giving us about an 18-month window to really push The Fallen. And I'm working on several things, but one of them is a 5th Derek Stillwater that I've started working, and it's a little disconcerting right at the moment because it takes place in Russia and it involves some terror attacks. And as I don't know when this is going to run, but yesterday and today there have been terror attacks in Russia, and it's like, and some of them are somewhat similar to what I was writing as I'm working on this 5th book, and it's like, okay, well. We'll see how that goes, but
when I've seen you outside of our interviews here, I've seen you at a couple of book conventions and stuff, and I say, Derek Stillwater is #1 man. The character is so well written for the big screen, and the books are so well written. Is that something you want to pursue? I think like all authors you must, but sure. Do you think about in particular, it seems like you must have an actor envisioned with this guy. You must have ideas where, wow, because it's so well written.
Whoopi Goldberg, maybe.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. Well, yes. Sure. Why not? That would be great. I think it would translate well to film. They're very actiony. This is a game that I suspect all writers play. Who will play the main character, and we get some fairly lively discussions. My wife has numerous opinions on this. Clooney always comes up, and Clooney's production company has read maybe this one. Will Smith's, interestingly enough, they had looked at it at one point. I like Matt Damon for it. The characters are similar. I particularly like Nick Cage for it. Now, Nick Cage did a similar character in the movie The Rock. When he played Dr. Stanley Goodspeed, who's
that's actually a good movie.
He's an FBI agent who's an expert in biological and chemical weapons, and that character's a little nutty. I mean, he's also a little more incompetent in terms of the physical things, and Derek is maybe many things, but he's former special forces, so he's physically capable, maybe too capable, because he certainly gets pushed around in this book physically.
One thing I liked about it is I really like about your novels is the reality of fight sequences or the repercussions of said fight sequence. And in this in particular, there's a point where he's saying to himself, this probably means I have a concussion. I've got double vision, I've got this, that, and the other. A lot of times, well, missiles are going off and this is happening and that's happening, you get punched and there's no, well, when you get hit, sometimes there's bad repercussions. And I like that about that, but he's still able, because of his training, he's able to gather himself and continue on.
I talk about this a lot because I'm sort of a gym rat, and I'm in okay shape. And you'll occasionally see people at the gym who are working at such a phenomenal level. You know, there's a guy. There's a trainer at the gym I work at who will strap a 45-pound weight to his knees and do chin-ups. You know, and not me. Yeah. And you know, and when you look at the training Special Forces people go through, the physical training, I mean, it's pretty astonishing, you know, and so I accept that there are certain people in the world that can work at a really high level. At the same time, I've been a martial artist for a long time, and you know, you're going to get hurt, and many people seem to continue to function. Some people, even though they've been hurt. Adrenaline helps, but I can say, you know, just last night at the workout, my teacher demonstrated what we call the 1-inch punch on me, which is where they basically put the punch here, and it's not back like this. It's just from right here. Yep. And you know, I was ready for it. I was in a good stance, and he just drilled me, and I ended up stepping back into it, and it was like, you know, nonetheless, you know, this is, I know what this is like.
You know what's coming, but it's
and the repercussions of these things. So that Derek, I try to be somewhat realistic. I mean, he works on a very high level, and he's an action hero.
Yep. Well, and he's a fantastic action hero, and that's Derek Stillwater of The Fallen. And Mark, we've just got about a minute left. I want you to tell the folks at home the website, because you've got all the news about what's going on in your life, the books, tours, all that type of stuff, free downloads at your website. Tell the folks at home so they can learn more about you and some of the previous books that they might want to pick up after reading.
Sure. The website is www.marktterrybooks.com. From there, you can look at all the books. The first chapter, I think the first 5 or 6 chapters of The Fallen, which are short. There's a Derek Stillwater short story you can read. For writers, there's a whole booklet on about writing that I've written that's available for a free download. The 2 previous Derek Stillwater novels, there's a novel just for the Kindle that I wrote called Dancing in the Dark, and a previous novel called Dirty Deeds, as well as one called Catfish Guru, which is a collection of novellas. Yeah. So again, that's markterrybooks.com.
Okay, excellent. Well, Mark, thanks so much for being on. We always love having you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Your books are real thrillers. Mark's book was The Fallen. I want you to also check out Stephen Deas, who we had on earlier in the show. He's got some amazing stuff out there. This is what makes Cult Pop so great. 2 great authors like this, one show. We hope you enjoyed it. Visit our website, www.cult-pop.com. You can revisit everything you saw here, the episode, and the books. Thanks for watching.